any further ado, let's move on to our next session, a fireside chat with Mr. Sanjeev Bikhchandani on the topic Building Businesses for Next Gen India. It is my privilege to introduce you all to Mr. Bikhchandani, who of course doesn't need any introduction, but just to give a quick background, he's the co-founder and executive vice chairman of InfoEdge, an $8 billion company that owns Nokricom, Jeevansathi.com, 99acres.com, and Siksha.com. He's also the co-founder of Ashoka University and was recently awarded the Padma Shri, which is the fourth highest civilian award in India. A very warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much. The chat will be moderated by Mr. Arjun Sehgal, who is a managing director at Morgan Stanley and is based out of Mumbai. He's part of the Morgan Stanley Private Equity Asia Fund and is the co-head of the fund's India investment operations. Mr. Sehgal currently serves on the boards of 5-Star Business Finance, SMT, Southern Health Foods, Cogta Financial, and Centrum Housing Finance. Prior to Morgan Stanley, he was with Baring Private Equity India. Mr. Sehgal is a graduate from London School of Economics and received his MBA from Columbia Business School. A very warm welcome, Mr. Sehgal.
Thank you so much, Ayush. Really appreciate it.
With that, I would hand it over to you, Mr. Sehgal, to kick off the session.
Great. Good evening, Sanjeev. Great to meet again.
How are you?
It's an honor to be able to have this chat. I thought I'd start off with a bit of an easy one. I just wanted to ask, did you always want to be an entrepreneur, lead your own business? I've seen that, you started off with a more kind of traditional career, advertising. You were into, I think you were with an FMCG brand before. So just how did you think about making that switch?
Well, I had an ambition to be an entrepreneur since I was 12 or 13 years old. It's one of those schoolboy dreams, right? So when I was 10 years old, I wanted to be Rajesh Khanna. When I was 11 years old, I wanted to be Sunil Gavaskar. And somehow when I was 12 or 13 years old, I figured that, it'd be a good idea to be an entrepreneur, right? And so it was a fuzzy dream. It was, but it kept coming back. So by the time I was in grade 11 or 12, I would tell, I remember a friend of mine asked me, what do you want to do, later on? I said, at some point in time, I'd like to start my own company and be an entrepreneur. Although in those days, we didn't say entrepreneur. We said, I want to run a business. That was the accepted sort of terminology then. The term entrepreneur became more commonly used much, much later.
And Sanjeev, how did you come up with the idea of Naukri.com? To kind of revolutionize the way things are done over here. Love to just know more about that.
So, now this is wisdom in hindsight. It was not, I didn't think of it then, but so what I believe now is that successful businesses are built on deep customer insights. And deep customer insights about what? About market gaps, unfulfilled needs, unsolved problems, right? That a consumer or prospective consumer may be facing. So I remember when in 1989-90, I was in my last job. This is post my MBA. I was in a company that was called HMM, and now it's called GlaxoSmithKline Consumer Healthcare in India. I was in marketing, and I was working on the brand Horlicks, right? And all the marketing, junior marketing executives would sit in a large open hall, so you could see what people were doing, right? Because there were no cabins, open hall. And I observed that, when the office copy of the fortnightly magazine Business India would come in and go from desk to desk, everybody would read it from the back. Because there were roughly 30 to 40 pages of appointment ads at the back of that magazine. And then people start discussing, right? And this behavior happened every fortnight. And after a few fortnights, I kind of figured that, jobs are a high interest category of information. I found a very unusual behavior. I thought people would read a magazine for the articles. Here they were reading a magazine for the jobs, and they were not looking for jobs. They were in a really good job in a really good company, right? And they would never apply, but still they would discuss. And I figured that, look, jobs are a high interest category of information. And this was an insight. I didn't know what to do with it. I quit my job, started the company, became an entrepreneur, did a few, drifted for 7 years, did 100 small things. And in '97, when I saw the internet for the first time at a trade show at an expo in Delhi, I very early, at that time there were only 14,000 internet accounts in the country, in India at that time, in '97. But it looked like a large number to me. And I said, why don't I get newspapers and magazines around the country which publish appointment ads, and every week, rehash the appointment ads in my own words and upload them on the site and keep the jobs live and current for maybe about a month. And that's how we launched. We would get these newspapers and magazines, into our office, and we would have a couple of data entry guys do the data entry, and we'd upload the jobs. And traffic began to come. We didn't have money. We were broke. We could not advertise. There was no venture capital, nothing. But traffic came on its own because I had got the insight that if you aggregate enough jobs, it'll be a traffic magnet. And that insight came from that observation. Similarly, when I met Deepinder Goyal, the founder of Zomato, for the first time in 2010, I asked him, where did you get this idea from? The first meeting. Ye idea kahan se aaya? Where did you get this idea from? And he said, I used to work in Bain Consulting. So Deepinder was 28 then, right? He had finished from IIT maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So he said, when I finished IIT, I joined Bain Consulting in Gurgaon, near Delhi. And Bain was this office where there were maybe 50 or 60 people working, mostly young, mostly single, mostly male, many of them living away from home. Right? Working hours were long. You would end up having 2 meals in the office usually, lunch and dinner, right? And people wouldn't get food from home. There was a cafeteria in the office, but it would not serve food, but you could bring your own food and have it there. So to make life easy for the employees, the admin team had put together a file folder of maybe 80 restaurants, delivery menu cards that would deliver to that location. And Deepinder said, at 1 p.m., there's a long line, I got to wait for the file, and then I get 2 minutes with the file, then I have to phone up, then the food comes after half an hour. It's a long process, it's very painful. I've got deadlines to meet, I've got work to do. So he says, one Saturday I came in, I scanned all those menu cards and uploaded them on my personal page on the office intranet. And 3 days later, the IT guy came to me and said, hey, what have you done? Why is 98% of internal traffic going to your page? Right? And that's when the penny dropped. And he said, oh my God, aggregation of menu cards has got value. It's not just my problem. Everybody wants to see all the menu cards. And so he went out on weekends to restaurants around Delhi, NCR, Delhi, Noida, Gurgaon, and just began to pick up menu cards. And when he had got 800 of them, he uploaded them on a site and called it Food eBay, which later became Zomato. And almost instantly traffic began to come. So those of us who are thinking of starting a company, all bright ideas are great, but some are better. The best ideas come from customers. And they come from observing customers, talking to them, listening. Maybe you've been and solving a pain point. Maybe you have been in the place of a prospective customer once where you felt the pain, right? So if you're looking for an opportunity, this is the best way to find it, according to me. Observe customers.
Sanjeev, one challenge I've noticed when I look at lots of different businesses, people tend to have great ideas, but very few are able to actually execute. And I think just to give the audience sort of wider context, India historically has not been a very easy place to do business, the way the system's been geared up. And I thought if you could just spend a couple of minutes talking about the India when you first started off, the environment, what it was like to even get permissions, approvals, just to start a company, versus say where we've reached today, where it seems that it's a much easier place now for people to sort of take the plunge. But we could just spend a little bit of time on how things have changed.
Yeah, so I'm 57. I finished college in 1984. Right? That's 36 years ago, 37 years ago. And I got into my first job in advertising straight from college. Right? I worked there for 3 years, then went to business school. Now, in 1984, when I finished college, I mean, it was a different world in India. Okay. The waiting list to get a telephone was 8 years. There were no mobile phones, and to get a landline, there was an 8-year waiting list. It was a government monopoly. The waiting list to buy a scooter, a two-wheeler, was 17 years. The waiting list to get a gas connection, a gas cylinder in your house, was 8 years. There was a complete shortage and scarcity economy. Right? And that's because of government regulations and this license permit Raj. Now, the license permit Raj largely applied to manufacturing and not to services. Because when the license permit Raj came in, services were a very small part of India's economy and they were largely ignored. Now, if you look at the GDP composition numbers, right now, I think 56 or 60% of India's GDP comes from services. When I finished college, I studied economics, so I remember the number, it was about 24%. So 24% to 56% in about 36 years tells me that it is services that has been the engine of growth. And services grew fast because they were not restricted by license permit. So if you look at most of the new age businesses, they're all in services. And India has never been a great manufacturing economy. It's now starting a bit, but there's way too many restrictions and permits and inspectors and so on. So it's different for services. It's slightly different for manufacturing, but still not different enough. Right? Today, you've got enough people who've done it before you, whom you can speak to. You've got a mentor network, you've got early stage capital, you've got organizations like TIE that help young entrepreneurs. You've got VC capital. So it used to be, until liberalization, until the 90s, right, that there were very few educated Indian entrepreneurs by choice. You were entrepreneurs by caste and community. In certain castes and communities, it's a done thing to be an entrepreneur. You were entrepreneurs in a business family. You were already in a business family, right? And therefore you started a business. But if you were middle class and educated and you went to an IIT or an IIM or a good college, you aspired to do a good job. You did not aspire to become an entrepreneur. It was hard. Today, you've got a new kind of entrepreneur. You have educated entrepreneurs who are entrepreneurs by choice. Because they can be, they want to be. They are not from business families, many of them. My father was a doctor. My mother, a homemaker. So many people I know, these new age entrepreneurs, they are from middle class families who have never been in business before. And that's the difference. And I'll tell you one more thing. See, every time I go to speak and give a talk at a IIT or an IIM or another good college, very often I ask them, how many of you are from middle class families where parents are salaried? They're in the government, public sector, railways, police, defense, scientists, academics. Roughly about 70 to 80% of the hands go up. It is basically middle class India that trains its children and conditions them to study hard. And they go and study hard because they tell their children that, son, you have nothing to inherit. We have no wealth. If you're going to make it in life, you have to make it through education. So you better study hard. Right? And so India's best students who get into these IITs and IIMs through competitive exams usually are from the middle class and middle class salaried families. And middle class India historically has had this huge quest for financial security and had this entrance exam mindset. Clear this entrance exam, get admission here, you'll be fine. Whether it's IIT, whether it's IIM, whether it's IAS, whether it's medicine, whether it's chartered accountancy, clear the exam. And then you're set for life. Right? So middle class India, parents traditionally were very, very risk averse. So we were never trained for entrepreneurship. But today that has changed. It is now socially acceptable for an educated middle class boy or girl to do a startup. When I started out in 1990, I was the oddball in my class. Very few. If you had asked people in my class, yeah, sorry, carry on.
I was going to ask, when you look at your experience, you had built Naukri, back in the day, and today you've, made a couple of investments. You're seeing these businesses scale up. When you compare and contrast, that was an easier time. That was a more difficult time. For example, I'm from the private equity field. I know, 15 years ago there wasn't that much private equity. In fact, I think you guys are funded by ICICI, one of the few people who were there at the time. Today, you have a problem of lots of competition, and people just looking to back a good idea. So just wanted to get your insight in terms of how the environment compares, what you are experiencing.
No, things have changed. Things have changed in many positive ways, and yes, there is more competition. Okay. But fundamentally, the market is larger. When I launched Naukri, there were 14,000 internet accounts in the country. When I raised venture capital, there were 4 million internet accounts in the country. Right? That's a 0.4% penetration. Right? And we raised money in April 2000. The bubble burst immediately thereafter. There was no hope of getting next one. You had to make do in $1.7 million, which is what we raised, and make money on that and survive. So infrastructure was poor, bandwidth was poor, these lines were expensive. We had a dial-up modem. Power was a problem. ACs won't work. A power backup in the UPS, we couldn't afford backup more than 20 minutes. So those are all the things. So yes, there was less capital, there was less competition, smaller market. Materially, you couldn't take a salary or take a very low salary for a long, long time, right? But competition was less, and that's great.
Could you maybe elaborate a little bit on your experience with private equity and how the role you've seen it play in the development of India?
So we raised venture capital, early stage, not private equity. We raised a small sum of money by today's standards, $1.7 million. That was 7.3 crore rupees then at that exchange rate. We raised from ICICI Venture. I think investor compatibility is key. See, you got to understand that if you want to build a company, great companies take a lifetime to build. Bill Gates and his original people, the people who started Microsoft, many of them devoted their lives to building the company. Great company. Google, launched in 1998, the founders are still there working at it. Facebook, 2005, still at it, 16 years, right? Oracle, Larry Ellison, lifetime. So you take a look at any great company. It takes a lifetime to build. A venture capital fund will be an 8-year, 9-year, 10-year fund. So their time horizon is more finite. And you got to give them an exit. As an entrepreneur, it's your responsibility, right? So if you are in for the long haul, if your goal is to build an institution that outlives you, that lasts a long, long time, right? You're running a marathon. Your venture capital partner who invests in you is a middle distance runner. He needs an exit. So you have the responsibility. You got to create conditions such that you build value, sufficient value at that time, in that interim time, in the first 8 years, 9 years, that you can provide your investor an exit without necessarily exiting yourself. Which means you go public, you find a buyer for their shares. But there's also the option of a sale, a strategic sale for the company. But then, it's not your company anymore, and you probably have to leave after a couple of years, and you're not building this thing over 30 years or 40 years. So it all depends on what your goals are. But my experience is very, very good. I think investor compatibility is key. I think ICICI Venture was very good for us. They invested in a bubble valuation in April 2000. Market melted down, and within 6 months, we had an investor who was staring at a 95% value loss in the investment. Very nervous. Now, they could have put a bullet into our heads. They had all the clauses in the agreement. but somehow they identified as somebody who can still do it, and they waited. Right? And they eventually did well because we returned almost the entire fund. They had invested in, they had invested in some 32.com from that fund. I think 29 they wrote off.
And then one change I'm seeing is that you're getting sort of a smaller number of companies who are just getting, hundreds of millions of dollars. So it almost seems like, a barrier to entry is becoming capital. Do you feel that this is, how do you view that? That you're basically in, a bunch of industries, you'll have a couple of guys who just got hundreds of millions of dollars. Does that kill competition, or that's just the natural way of things?
Look, this is going to happen if global markets are flush with liquidity the way they are. It's a natural consequence of that. Now, as an entrepreneur, if capital is your only strategy, in each market, there will be only one winner, right? Because very often internet businesses are winner-take-all markets. So there will be one horizontal e-commerce player in India who will win. Now there are two, there's Flipkart and Amazon, and they both got deep pockets, so maybe they'll continue for a while. Or maybe forever, I do not know. But when you're Snapdeal or Flipkart, you knew only one would win. And who would win would be the one who had more access to capital. Right? Now, as an entrepreneur, do you want to bet your life and your company on continuous access to capital is the question. I would say invest in businesses or focus on innovating, focus on network effects, focus on building IP, focus on community, focus on algorithms, focus on smart stuff. So you can build a moat which capital cannot attack so easily. So mere capital cannot kill you, or lack of it cannot kill you. But if you are not able to do that, and capital is your only strategy, you may win if you have this great ability to raise capital, but who knows, it could be the other guy.
Sanjeev, you made a number of platform investments, Zomato, Policy Bazaar, 99 Acres and so on. Which one are you most excited about in terms of sort of long-term value creation, and what makes that stand out versus the other investments you made? Kind of putting you on the spot here.
So look, when we invest, we love the company we invest in, right? And that's why we invest. Because we have confidence, we have hope, we like the entrepreneur, like the idea, like what it's doing, and we take a bet. And we work with that company. Now, over time, things emerge, right? And yes, some make it big and some don't. It does not mean that we love the other one less. The truth is they did not make it. Okay, so in terms of financial returns, obviously Zomato and Policy Bazaar have delivered us the most. Not yet, we've not exited, but on paper at least, right? But there are a bunch of younger companies very excited about. So there is Shop Kirana, there is Business, there is Gramophone, there are there is Shipsy, there is Adda 24. There are a bunch of them, but they're much smaller right now. And hopefully over time, they'll also emerge as value creators.
And Sanjeev, as you sort of transition from, building and scaling yourself to now investing in more businesses, which role do you actually, which do you prefer? And where does sort of your heart lie?
So look, it's always more fun to create yourself. So if you've ever been a business builder, right? That's always the biggest high. It's the most creative thing to do. To think of product, to understand the consumer, to produce something the consumer likes. It's a great high. Okay. So when I transitioned out of the CEO role in 2010 and began to invest from the Info Edge balance sheet, it was a difficult transition for me because suddenly I had no team, suddenly I couldn't do it myself, suddenly, the truth is most good entrepreneurs, they don't become an entrepreneur because they want a new boss. So you can't go and tell them what to do. You can have a conversation and you can suggest. It's up to the entrepreneur whether he or she will do what you want, what you're suggesting or not. So maybe 8 out of 10 ideas you give won't get done. right? So you got to get used to that, right? But after 2 or 3 years of the transition, I got used to it and I began to enjoy it. So today I'd say I enjoy both equally, but I haven't done actual business building for 10 years now. Could I do it again? I'd like to believe so. I'd like to believe so. But understand one thing. In 2010, social media wasn't so big. The internet over mobile wasn't so big. There were no apps. The world has changed. I'd probably have to start from scratch once again, but I'd love to do it.
Is there any particular vertical right now where you have a particular interest in, or you see a huge opportunity that you could maybe talk about if you're comfortable?
Yeah. So listen. So that's not the way we do it. We did try to go top down and say, hey, which vertical should we look at? Now, if I do that, the natural thing would be, you know what? We are in 4 classified categories, but we don't have auto. Why aren't we in auto? We should be in auto. And then you go out looking for an auto company. And then you discover that, look, there are 2 or 3 strong players there. They're not available for sale. If they are, it'll be too expensive. So you will invest in the 4th guy and you'll fail. Because the 4th guy will fail unless it's differentiated, right? So we say, okay, that ship has sailed, right? Let's not go top down. We go bottom up. We meet 1,000 companies a month, startups. Figure out who's doing what looks interesting. Should we back it? So for instance, if in 2008 you had told me, you know what, why don't you look at the insurance comparison space? I would say, what's that? We could, But we met the Policybazaar team. They were wanting to do it in India. It would be a first in India. And we said, looks interesting. Yashish gave me a demo. He said, Sanjeev, I'm willing to bet you're paying 60% more for your car insurance than you need to. I said, don't be silly. I said, I was under the impression that, look, all insurance is priced the same. These are public sector companies. Why on earth should it be different? So you took my car model, car make, model, year, kilometers traveled, no claim bonus, track record, driver driven or owner driven, all that. And he input it into a spreadsheet and he queried something. And sure enough, I was paying 60% more. I said, wow. He says, insurance pricing is very opaque, very different from provider to provider, and people don't check. And I knew this will work. I said, if there's so much fat in the system, it'll work. But this is not an idea I would have ever invested if I'd gone top down. Likewise, in 2010, if you told me, why don't you invest in the restaurant listing space? I would have said, you're crazy. But we bet Dipinder, and you bet. So according to us, bottom up, keeping an open mind, meeting everybody and seeing what's bubbling through is a far better approach than sectors and verticals and analysis top down, and it's worked for us.
And Sanjeev, in the investment, is it really taking a call on one person, or it's sort of a whole team? I mean, how does it work in your mind?
I think the first, we look at 4 things. Number 1 is, if they've already launched, are they getting natural traction? The term we use is natural traction. Like Nokricom got natural traction. Didn't advertise, got traffic. Traffic kept growing. We had no money. Zomato, natural traction. They had built a traffic magnet. Right? Policybazaar, we invested pre-launch. So in pre-launch, you will say, how compelling is the value prop? He gave me a demo. He showed me I'm paying 40% more, 60% more. And I sat up and said, wow, I know that's a compelling proposition. What we also look at is obviously quality of team. Now there you're taking bets. Deepinder was 28. We know it takes 10 to 15 to 20 years to build a company in India. Scale from start. Now at 28, he's running a 10% organization. And I said, by the time he's 35, he might run a 2,000-person organization. Can he handle it? Will he stay the course? Will he have commitment? Will he, after 3 years, say, hey, what, I'm going to do an MBA? These are all conversations we had with him. How will he treat minority shareholders? You're taking bets on people 10 years out on how they will behave. Their judgment calls. We sometimes get it wrong. We learn from those mistakes and move on. So people matter. And the third thing we look at is, what's the competitive scenario? In a winner-take-all market, if it's an established incumbent, don't go in. Is this company differentiated? It's offering, is it building IP? Does it have network effect? These are all important considerations. Sorry, carry on.
That's very helpful. And just wanted to shift gears a little bit and was wondering if you could just spend a couple of minutes on, Ashoka University, the conceptualization and your role and, how it's taking shape. I think people would be really interested to hear about that.
Yeah, so Ashoka University was a bunch of people coming together to say we want to build a world-class college in India with a few differences. Number one, it'll be collective private philanthropy. It won't be one company or one business house or one person putting in the money and therefore naming it after himself or whatever. It'll be a group of people. So no matter how much money you donate, you can only get one seat on the board of Ashoka. So it belongs to no one person. What this ensures is that the faculty have independence, because no one person can take a call. And if faculty have independence and you're committed to excellence as a group of founders, you will attract great faculty. If you attract great faculty, you will get great students. So that is one conceptual difference. Second conceptual difference was India follows the British system. You choose a subject in college and then you study it. The US undergrad, you do width and then depth. You decide your major at the end of second year in college, which basically means that you're studying 8-9 subjects. There's a width requirement. And then you figure out what you want to major in. To our mind, this is a far better way to do it. Right? Because the truth is, life doesn't work in silos. Life is multidisciplinary. Right? And also, when you're passing out of school in India, you're reasonably clueless. What subject you do and what you study and which department of engineering that you get depends not on what you're interested in. It depends on what your grades were. If this is your rank in IIT entrance, sorry, you can't get this, you can get that department. They decide for you, you don't decide. If this is your class 12 score, you can't get economics in this college, but okay, we'll give you history. Right? And we felt that was wrong. So you declare your major at the end of 1.5 years in Ashoka. We believe that's a better way to do it. And you have width requirements. Right? We wanted a financial model where the wealthier kids pay full fees and there's a very generous scholarship program for the poorer children. Right? So there's inclusion, at the same time it's financially viable. Although we are still running deficits in Ashoka. Significant deficit, but it's fine, we're funding it. We're getting there, right? We also said that we will attract the best possible faculty from all over the world to this college, right? I think barring 1 or 2 of Ashoka's faculty, and there are over 100 now, all are PhDs. Many of them PhDs in the best places in the world. We've done it 2 ways. Number one is, you see, we focused a lot on research. We give a lot of faculty independence. They set their own courses, their own curriculum, their own research program, their own travel to conferences, all of that. Right? It lacks the bureaucracy of many other Indian universities. People are happy with that. If you were a technology faculty of Indian origin somewhere else in the world, in the West, in the US or UK, you had a place to come back to, which is usually the IITs and enough private engineering colleges. But if you were from social sciences, humanities, and natural sciences, there weren't so many great places to come back to. Ashoka filled that gap nicely. We are now a magnet for faculty talent. That makes a huge difference.
And then the other question I just wanted to ask is, given the fact that, look, you really accomplished a lot in terms of building your own company, investing successfully in a bunch of companies, you've got initiatives which are sort of outside business. What next? What kind of keeps you going? Because you just come across as being very passionate, so I can't see you just sort of saying, yeah, but at a certain age.
So I haven't.
What kind of?
So I haven't thought of retiring. Okay. I don't think that's something I'll do easily. Okay. I've still got enough juice left, I believe. I'm not going to found a new company and run it. That's unlikely. But obviously, InfoEdge is there. It needs me. I'm there. I'm there full time. I get a salary from there. And I invest on behalf of InfoEdge. And we just launched an AIF where we've got half the money from InfoEdge and half from Temasek. And we are investing from that. So I'm busier now than I was, say, 3 years ago. And it's because of Zoom. It's because of working remote. So there's a company I invested in my private capacity called Wow Momo. Wow Momo is a chain of Momo restaurants. Founder is a guy called Sagar Daryani. Young fellow, very bright, super hardworking. So I was on the panel with him once, and somebody asked him, Sagar, what's your view on work-life balance? And Sagar said, there is no work-life balance if you're doing a startup. There is work-life integration. Right? And I laughed when he said that. But with the working from home, and I'm still working from home, and with Zoom calls, you're expected to be available 24/7, even on weekends. Okay, and so you are, right? And that's what I do.
And Sanjeev, just last question from my side. Any advice? You've got a bunch of MBA students who I guess are deciding about whether they want to sort of pursue their passion right away in terms of starting businesses or different jobs. Just anything you could just share with them as they're making their decisions on their career path.
So it's a tough one, right? It's a tough one. Okay, so if you're taking loans to pay for an expensive MBA, right? I would say get debt free before you think of starting something, right? Number one, it's not a good idea to do a startup where you're hard up for cash because you don't have, money to actually do the startup, and you also have loans to repay, right? Second, I'm often asked this question, right? What job should I do if I want to be an entrepreneur? So I was speaking to Sanjeev Agarwal of Helion Ventures, and before that, Daksh. And he gave a very good answer to somebody who asked that question. He said, in your first job, if you want to be an entrepreneur, in your first job, you should either be making something or selling something. Because these are things that you will need to do as an entrepreneur. Make and sell, right? It'll give you experience of execution. It'll give you experience of persuading a customer. But I do know that jobs in Wall Street and in consulting are very, very attractive, right? And maybe many people in the audience who are studying for the MBA at Columbia will get those opportunities, right? And manufacturing jobs, selling jobs are not that glamorous, and they don't pay that well, right? But this is something that you have to think through. It's not that you can't become an entrepreneur after doing an investing job or a consulting job. It's just that, if you are working in a job that requires operations, selling or operations, maybe you're being better trained for being an entrepreneur.
That's it from my side. Thank you very much. Ayush, I think there may be some questions that are to be posed.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for such an insightful and informative session. We have a series of questions in our chat box. I will quickly select a few. Starting with the first one, sir, how well do you think our startups in India are positioned to compete on the global scale? Are Indian startups innovative enough to compete?
In many cases, yes. Okay, but I'll tell you something. Most Indian startups are targeting the domestic market, right? Some are targeting, especially B2B SaaS companies, will target overseas. I don't think the problem is going to be innovation or lack of it. The problem may be market access, right? If you're targeting the US market, for example. People have found it hard to actually penetrate the US market if you're an Indian company. But innovation, I think, unless you're doing serious deep tech or you're doing serious high-tech manufacturing, where innovation is harder in India compared to the US, by and large, people are innovative enough, except in these areas. Is my sense.
Just building on that discussion, how do you see the Indian technology and startup ecosystem different from US or globally? And do you see the Indian ecosystem would catch up in the next 10, 20 years?
No, it's hard to catch up because Silicon Valley is in a place which is truly unassailable. And people in the 15, 20 years ago would constantly ask this question to panelists at conferences. How come Google wasn't built in India? What did Google do that we couldn't do? Right? So the fundamental thing is that great consumer products are conceived where the consumer is. Because it is that person who's close to the customer, who understands the customer. Which basically means you need a large domestic market to get the kind of capital that is available to Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, because they typically first address the US market. It's a very large market. So a large market means you can get to a large company with large profits. So larger sums of money can come in early stage to back that price. Okay. Now, India, therefore, will be constrained by the size of its economy vis-a-vis China or vis-a-vis USA. We will do it at our own pace, at our own scale, in our own way. But to say we will replace Silicon Valley even in 20 years, I don't see that as likely. We simply do not have that size of market to attract that kind of capital that will build these kind of companies and who will then go global from India after having got the domestic market. It's kind of structural.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insights. On behalf of the Columbia University, I would like to thank our esteemed speakers for their key insights. It has been an absolute honor to have you both join us today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And one thing I wanted to mention, I forgot to earlier, that one reason I did this was because my daughter graduated from Columbia in 2015, undergrad. Thank you so much.